Great. Welcome everyone, I'm Don Ritchie. I'm an associate professor here at Adams State University with the School of Business. I'd like to introduce Michelle Little. Michelle is from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. She is a dual major in biology and marketing. And with that said, I'd like to introduce her and her presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Little, and I'm going to introduce the topic, the Keystone XL pipeline, whether it's a boom or a bust. So this is an overview of the presentation. First, I'm going to discuss what the pipeline is, the political challenges that come along with it, the concerns, and a summary. So first off, the pipeline is a 36-inch in diameter pipeline. It's going to be buried 4 feet under the ground, span across 6 different states. It's going to be over 1,000 miles along the U.S. stretch and over 300 miles along the Canada stretch. It's going to cost an estimated $7 to $13 billion. It's going to actually start in Hardisty, Alberta, and end in Nederland and Moore Junction, Texas. Currently, there's a Keystone pipeline that has a capability of moving 380,000 barrels per day. But with the XL extension, it can move up to 700,000 barrels a day, an increase of about 400,000 barrels a day of oil. So over here is an image of the red, right here, is the current existing Keystone pipeline, and that starts again in Hardisty and stops in Steel City. Patoka, Illinois has a side pipeline, and they meet up in the Steel City refinery. The current pipeline proposal is the black and white line starting in Hardisty, going through Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, meeting up in Steel City, and then continuing on down through Oklahoma and Texas to the Gulf of Mexico. So next I'm going to discuss the importance of trade. Canada is the U.S.'s #1 trading partner. They account for 29% of all oil imports into the U.S. And many people that are supporting this project say that this is a good way to keep the money within North America. Compared to the other nations, Saudi Arabia, for every dollar spent on oil, 29 cents gets put back into the U.S. economy. Venezuela, only 46 cents gets put back into the U.S. economy through services and goods, whereas Canada, 90 cents gets put back into the U.S. economy through services and goods. So the next thing I'm going to discuss is the company that's actually proposing this pipeline. It's called TransCanada. It's an oil and gas company out of Calgary, Alberta. They are proposing that this will help decrease the 16% national unemployment rate in the U.S. and also increase oil imports by 20 to 30%. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the political agreements. This project was actually first proposed in 2008. Because it's an international project, they've had to apply for a presidential permit. A presidential permit, you need the EPA and a bunch of other organizations as well as the government to approve this, and it has since been rejected 3 times. This current proposal, the State Department actually last week just determined that there's no significant impacts to the most resources along the proposed project route. And in current events, there is a 62 to 37 vote in the Senate last week to approve the pipeline. There are still discussions going on in the House of Representatives. The final the final approval for the current deal has to be done by April 22nd, 2013. So I'm going to discuss some of the economic concerns that come along with this project. There are 34 counties that this pipeline is going to flow through. And of that, there's 28 that are below the income state average. So one of the arguments that TransCanada proposed is trying to increase employment. The State Department just concluded that only 10% of the local population would be employed by this project. And this is also another interesting thing, was trying to find an actual number, like an estimate of the jobs that it can create. I found anywhere from 3,600 to what the State Department just said, 42,000, just over 42,000. But the catch to this is that this is only a temporary job. These are all temporary jobs, so it's a 1 to 3 year project. So most of these jobs are going to be the construction workers and people that will be building it, and only 35 will actually sustain the pipeline. This is some more data on the revenue that this project could bring in. The State Department estimates that employment could bring in $2.05 billion. Materials in project materials for the Keystone Pipeline could bring in $3.3 billion. Sales tax, $65 million, and temporary housing for people coming in and building would be $2 million. So the next issue that is of concern is the ethical issues that come along with such a huge project. There's a thing called duty of diligence, and this is making informed and prudent decisions regarding land compensation and lawsuits. So with this project, there's a great chunk that's going to go through private land, especially, all through, especially farmers' land, like in Nebraska. And I found a TED Talk, and on PBS, TransCanada is looking at paying out Nebraskans and private landowners, and also trying to compensate them for future costs if there's damage to the environment, if there's spills, etc. But not all the landowners are interested in taking this option. So there is a thing called eminent domain. It was actually a Supreme Court ruling in 2005. It was a 5-4 vote that forces private landowners to give up their land to public or private companies, as long as the catch is if it is for the greater good of the public. So this happens often with trains and public roads and stuff. But TransCanada has already qualified by state utility commissions, and it's already affecting Nebraskans and Texans. But Montana, I actually did find some stuff on Montana. They are the only state out of this project that have laws to actually protect their landowners. The next ethical issue I'm going to discuss with you is the native lands protection. There is 3 current reservations that I found: the Pine Ridge Reservation, the Cheyenne River Eagle Butte Reservation, and the Rosebud Reservation. All of these reservations are against the pipeline. The Pine Ridge Reservation, actually last year there was 5 arrests because they blockaded some of the Keystone materials from going through their land. And the Cheyenne Butte River Eagle Butte, they have done hunger strikes. They have also worked in collaboration with the I Don't No More campaign in Canada on Parliament Hill, which is equivalent to the White House here, to try and protest against this. And these are some national protection acts that TransCanada is looking into to see if they actually can build through their land. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, of course, the environmental concerns. The pipeline is actually going to run through over 200 bodies of water: Yellowstone River, Missouri River, Red River. One of the biggest body masses is the Ogallala Aquifer. It's a shallow wetland that's home to many animals, and it's 3.27 billion acre-feet of water and covers across 174,000 square miles of land. It also provides 2 million people in America with drinking water and is responsible for irrigating 27% of American cropland. It also is home to over 300 species. Up here, I'm going to discuss the sandhill crane, and then I'm going to discuss the upland piper and the bison. These are endangered species already. This is a kangaroo rat and an elk walking through some waterlands. All of these consider the sandhill region and are reliant on the Ogallala Aquifer. And if there was a spill, this could potentially extinct the animals from this area, and especially the animals that are already endangered. It could have a huge impact on their survival. So this is just an image to show you how vast the aquifer is. I found a really interesting quote, said if a spill did occur, the potential for oil to reach groundwater in these areas is relatively high. That is because there is regions in this area that the water is only 4 feet deep. And like I mentioned earlier, the pipes can be underground 4 feet deep. So there's a really good potential that if there was a leak, that it could get into the water system. And even though it's going through Nebraska, not hitting Colorado, you can see part of Colorado and other states that the pipeline's not running through are still connected by the aquifer. So it could have a vast effect if there is a leak in somewhere along this area. So I'm also going to talk about the tar sands. The tar sands is a special type of oil in Alberta. It's also called dilbit, which stands for diluted bitumen. It's more corrosive than traditional oil because it has heavy metals like vanadium, arsenic, and nickel. It also contains a lot of carcinogenic materials. One of the components is benzene, which I'm going to talk about later. And the carbon emissions are 3 times that of traditional oil. And it's more corrosive because it has all these chemicals in it, and they have to push it at a higher temperature, making it more susceptible to pipeline leaks. So this image, there's lots going on here. This is the U.S., obviously. And these little dots indicate that the oil spills that have occurred from 1990 on, there's been over 110 million gallons leaked into the U.S. environment since 1990. And this area in black indicates the region where the pipeline would go through. So these big dots are 4.5 million gallons of leakage, and the little dots are about 1 million or less. So to reinforce what I've been saying about pipeline spills, I'm just going to discuss some past pipeline spills. This is the Enbridge-Kalamazoo River spill that happened July 26, 2010. It released 800,000 gallons of oil into a 35-mile stretch area of the Kalamazoo River. And they're still cleaning this up. It took 42 boats, 48 skimmers, and over 2,000 people to try and rehabilitate the environment and clean up the region affected. And many people experienced benzene or experienced sicknesses, and the EPA discussed a little bit about how it's because they found, one of the reasons, many reasons, is because they found benzene in the water. Benzene is an organic compound that's carcinogenic. Short-term, it causes headaches and can actually reduce your immune strength. But long-term, it actually can be carcinogenic and cause cancers. And then, of course, I have to talk about the most famous one. This is the BP Deepwater Horizon offshore rig. There was an explosion that killed 11 people. It caused $670 billion in damage, and there was 2.1 million gallons of oil released into the Gulf on a daily basis. BP was only fined $75 million, $75 million for liability. So that was to cover all environmental damage and compensate industries affected. And then I'm also going to discuss current events. This occurred actually on March 27th. This is the Canadian Pacific Rail's derailment. 14 cars in rural Minnesota carrying Alberta tar sands flipped over. They're claiming responsibility. Luckily, no one was hurt, and they're in the process of cleaning it up. It was actually, I found some articles talking about how TransCanada was using this as a crutch to say that this is why it's important to have pipelines to reduce accidents like this. But then, the following day, Exxon's Pegasus pipeline burst. And this is in Mayflower, Arkansas. And 40 homes were evacuated. It's still unclear. Between 90,000 and 400,000 barrels were released into the environment. And it's still unsure how it's going to affect. A lot of them are evacuated. There's people cleaning up, but it's not completely, because it's so recent, the actual damage and the cost is unclear. So this just kind of wraps up the idea that we need to be cautious going into a project like this because of disasters like this that occur. In, for example, the Mayflower and the derailment incident. So in summary, I just want to conclude that this is a 4-year proposal. It's been going on for 1,600 days, over 1,600 days, and it's an international project. So there's more people there's more processes that have to go along, like with the presidential proposal, and so basically it's really controversial because there's so many ethical, environmental, and economic issues that come along with it. So I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation and open up the floor to any questions.